A hand sets 3 objects on a counter. Tape, zip ties, a blade with a retractable edge. Unhurried, like groceries. Nothing about the smile above them looks like a threat. That's the trick of it. Somewhere in this story, a man believes he is the only wolf in the room. He is wrong, because every calm word tonight is already being written down. Because a stranger 3 feet away already knows his record. Because a mother 3 towns over is about to remember a party she's spent 11 years trying to forget. And because the woman ringing up his purchase, and steady now, and getting steadier by the second, has already made up her mind that tonight is the last night she flinches. The tape gets scanned. The doors chime, cheerful and ordinary, and completely wrong. Somewhere behind that smile, a debt is already coming due. The cast on her arm was 3 days old. The bruise under her eye a little older than that. She was crying at Register 4, scanning a rotisserie chicken with her good hand, while the tears just came sliding down into the collar of her uniform, like they had somewhere better to be. Nobody stopped. Nobody does. Not really. That's the part they never put in the stories. Not the bruise, not the cast. The part where a woman falls apart under fluorescent light at 10 in the morning and the whole store just keeps beeping along like nothing at all is wrong. That same morning, none of it had happened yet. That same morning, Simone Ashworth still believed she had it handled. 6:12 a.m. Bathroom mirror. Bad lighting. Concealer that cost more than she could justify and still wasn't doing its one job. She worked the sponge in small circles. Under the eye. Blend check. Still purple at the edges. Always still purple at the edges. She leaned closer to the mirror, like proximity might fix it. Like if she just got close enough, an ugly enough truth might turn into something she could live with. It didn't. Behind her small feet in the hallway. She knew the rhythm before the girl even spoke, knew it was Willow, because 8 years old and stubbornly, achingly observant, her daughter had learned to move quiet through this house. Too quiet. Nobody should have to teach an 8-year-old to move quiet through her own house. Mama, in here, baby. Willow appeared in the doorway, mismatched socks, backpack all ready, on the kind of ready that came from a kid who'd learned not to be the reason anyone was late. Her eyes went to the cast, then up to the bruise. Does it still hurt? Here was the test Simone failed every single morning. Lie fast, lie clean, lie like it costs nothing. Only a little. A smile pinned on. I'm tougher than I look. Willow didn't smile back, which was its own kind of answer. In the kitchen, Theo was already at the table, 6 years old, humming some cartoon theme under his breath, swinging his feet because they didn't reach the floor yet. He didn't look up. He'd learned that, too. The specific, terrible skill of not noticing things. Corbin was at the counter. Freshly showered, dressed for a job that paid him enough to make people believe he was one of the good ones. Her purse was open in front of him. He was counting. You're short, he said. Not looking up either. Everyone in this kitchen an expert at not looking up. I need bus fare. And lunch money for... You had grocery money Tuesday. That was for groceries. He looked at her then, just for the second. Long enough. Careful, he said. Soft, almost gentle if you didn't already know what gentle was supposed to sound like. We don't need another conversation like Tuesday. Not in front of them. Theo kept humming. Willow had gone very still by the doorway the way she went still whenever the air in a room changed, and Simone hated that her daughter already knew how to read a room like a woman twice her age. Corbin peeled a $5 bill loose, held it out like a gift. There, a smile, easy practiced. Big one for the customers today, baby. Nobody likes a sad cashier. She took the money. She kissed him goodbye. It tasted like nothing, like habit, like something her mouth did, while the rest of her stood a few feet back, watching. Because that was the trick of it. That was how 3 years went by. You didn't leave all at once. You just learned to stand somewhere else while your body did whatever kept everyone safe. 40 floors up and across town, in an office where the windows turned the whole skyline into something a person could own, Sawyer Calder was reading a letter for the 5th time. Someone at store 23 is being pushed past what a person can survive. You need to see it before it's too late. No signature. Just that. He'd built Calder Markets out of one store his grandfather left him. 40-some locations now. His name over every door in red block letters. Margins that made analysts say nice things about him twice a year. And somewhere in one of his own stores, somebody was drowning. Had maybe been drowning a while. Under his name. On his watch. He set the letter down. "Clear my week," he told his assistant. "I'm going in as a hire. Store 23. Sir, not a word, not even to my brother." I didn't know her name yet. Didn't know that by the end of this day, he'd be watching a stranger's hands shake too hard to hold a scanner gun, and that the man standing in this office right now, certain comfortable, mostly a tourist in his own company, would not survive meeting her. He just knew somebody needed to be seen, so he was going to go look. The bus took 45 minutes. 45 minutes where Corbin couldn't reach her, couldn't remind her, couldn't do anything but exist somewhere behind her. 3 miles and 1 bridge, and a whole ocean of pretending away. She practiced her face in the window's reflection, adjusted the smile, softer, warmer, the version that didn't ask anything of anyone. Smile even though your arm is on fire. Smile even though you can't quite see out of the left side of the world today. Smile because this job is the only thing standing between your kids and the street. And a smile is free. And free was the only thing Simone Ashworth could currently afford. Store 23 was already loud by 8:25. Early shoppers, coffee, the particular chaos of a Tuesday. "You look like hell," said Faye from Register 3. Not unkindly. Faye said everything not unkindly, possibly her only setting. "Long night. That man of yours needs to..." Faye. Both hands up. Dropped. That was the deal here, unspoken, but absolute everybody had something. Nobody asked twice. She was adjusting her name tag one-handed, which took longer than it should when she noticed him. New guy. Standing near customer service in a jacket too warm for the weather, filling out paperwork like it might bite him. Something about the way he stood. Still. Watching the room instead of the clipboard. She didn't think about it again. She had a register to open, and a face to keep smiling, and exactly 0 room in her day for noticing men. The morning went the way mornings went. Scan bag smile, Mrs. Patterson's grandkids, Mr. Delgado's flowers, a sticker for a toddler mid-meltdown by the gum rack. Then just after 10, a man in a suit that cost more than her rent set his items down without looking at her. Phone against his ear. Talking over her through her the way some people talked to cashiers like cashiers were a feature of the store, and not people who could hear them. "Sir, I just need a price check on this." He looked at her. Really looked for the first time. And whatever he saw, the cast, the eye, the concealer, that wasn't doing its one job. His whole face changed. "Are you kidding me?" Not to her. To the line behind her, to the ceiling, to whoever would listen. "They've got the walking wounded on registers now. Sir, I don't want excuses from someone who can't take care of herself." Louder, on purpose now. "Where's your manager? I want someone competent." And that was the moment. Not the words. She'd survived worse words at home. It was being seen. In public. By a stranger who took one look and decided exactly what kind of woman she was. And got it right. That was the unbearable part. He wasn't even wrong. And said it out loud where everyone could hear. Her hand started shaking before her brain caught up. Breathe. In through the nose. Until her lungs stopped taking requests. Until the fluorescent lights went too loud, if light could be loud, and the line behind her had gone quiet in that specific way. A crowd goes quiet, right before someone falls down. "I can't." Her own voice small wrong. "I can't." Somebody moved. She registered it sideways through the tunnel her vision had become. The new guy. Stepping in beside her like he had every right to be there. "There's no need to speak to her that way," he said. Calm. Too calm for a man on his first shift. "She's doing her job." The suit turned on him instead. Fine, let him. Simone couldn't have spoken to save her life just then, and the smallest, strangest part of her, the part still capable of noticing anything, thought he didn't even hesitate. By the time Holt arrived, drawn by the scene, the way flies find something rotting. Simone was in a chair Faye had dragged over one hand, white-knuckled on the armrest, trying to remember how lungs were supposed to work. "What is going on?" Not a question. Holt's voice never asked. It just landed. "Your employee is having some kind of breakdown," the suit said, already halfway to the door, already bored now that he'd won. Holt looked at her, the way you'd look at a spill somebody needed to mop up. "Clock out," he said. "Go home." "I need the hours." Should have thought of that before you made a scene. 11 words. That was the whole verdict. 11 words and 3 days of grocery money gone, and Simone walking to the break room on legs that didn't feel like hers, past a dozen faces that looked away fast, the way faces always did. Later, once the store had swallowed the whole thing and moved on. The way stores do, Holt found himself watching the new higher stack cans in aisle 6 with unhurried, unbothered precision. Too calm. That's what needled at him. Guys fresh off a construction site didn't stand that still under pressure. Didn't step into a screaming match with a customer like he'd done it in boardrooms before. Corporate sends people sometimes. Quiet ones. Ones who watch and write reports and disappear again. Holt didn't know which was worse. A spy sent to catch him running his floor into the ground, or the sinking, specific feeling that he already knew the answer. He decided to keep his own eyes open, just in case. In the break room, Simone sat with her time card in her lap doing math she already knew the answer to. 3 days short now. And Corbin was going to want to know why, and there was no version of that conversation that ended well. The door opened. Not Holt. Not the new guy. Anne, older woman, 70, maybe cardigan, the color of a robin's egg, the kind of face that had spent decades being kind to strangers as a professional habit, and never managed to unlearn it. Irregular. Register 4 every Thursday, always asking after the kids by name. "Mrs. Callahan, I'm sorry we're not open at this regu." Billy. She sat down across from her, uninvited, the way people who've spent 40 years in hospital rooms sit down, like permission was implied by the emergency. "I'm not here to check out, honey." Simone didn't have the energy to ask what she was here for. Billy reached into her purse, set something on the table between them. A folded napkin. On it in careful cursive, a phone number and 3 words. You are not alone. I was a nurse for 41 years, she said. Like that explained the napkin. Like that explained everything. You learn to read a body the way some people read a room. The cast, the eye, the way you flinch when a man raises his voice, even a stranger, even one who deserved every bit of flinching. A pause. That's not weakness, sweetheart. That's a body that's been keeping very good notes. Something closed around Simone's throat that she didn't have a name for. I don't. You don't have to call today. Billy stood, patted her shoulder once light as a leaf landing. Or tomorrow. Just don't lose the napkin. At the door, she turned back. You're not invisible, honey, she said. I don't care what that man in the suit thinks he saw. I see you. Then she was gone back into the fluorescent hum of the store, leaving Simone alone with a folded napkin, an empty time card, and the first small crack of something that might, given time, look like hope. She didn't know yet how much was about to change. She only knew that tonight she'd have to go home. And that home tonight was waiting for her, in a way it hadn't been this morning, back when she still believed she had it handled. The porch light was on when she got home. That was the first sign. Corbin didn't leave it on. Not since the electric bill fight in March, which meant he'd been standing at that door at some point, waiting, watching the street for her, and a man like Corbin didn't wait unless he already knew something. He knew about the pay. Of course, he knew about the pay. The bank app, pinged straight to his phone, had for a year now, ever since he'd framed it as helping. As we're a team. Baby teams share everything, and there it would be sitting in his notifications like a little red flag. 3 days short. She stood in the doorway a second too long before going in. Inside Willow's homework on the table, half finished. Theo's shoes by the couch, thrown off mid-cartwheel the way 6-year-olds throw off shoes. Ordinary. A house that looked from the doorway like nothing at all was wrong with it. Corbin was at the kitchen table. Not eating. Just sitting hands folded, the posture of a man who'd rehearsed this. Kids are already down, he said. Pleasant. Which was worse than angry, because angry she knew the shape of. Pleasant meant something was coming that he wanted to enjoy. Corbin. I can explain explain what? Still pleasant, still smiling. I didn't ask you anything. That was the trick of him. He never asked. He just let the silence sit there, huge, and waiting until she filled it with her own confession, until she did the work of accusing herself, so he wouldn't have to raise his voice at all. So she did it. Because the alternative was worse, and some math you just do without thinking anymore. I got sent home early, without pay. There was a customer and You had a scene at work. Not a question. It wasn't like that. Simone, just her name. He said it the way other men said sit to a dog, and some ugly, exhausted part of her hated that she still flinched at the sound of her own name in his mouth. You're embarrassing me. Do you understand that people at that store know who I am? They don't, she thought. Nobody at that store has ever asked your name. But that thought stayed exactly where it lived, behind her teeth, where it was safe. He stood up. Slow. Unhurried, because hurry was for people who were afraid of getting caught, and Corbin never worried about that. Not once, not in 3 years, not with 2 kids sleeping 20 feet away, and a wife-shaped woman standing in his kitchen who'd stopped a long time ago being anyone he had to be careful with. We're going to have a conversation, he said. Later, when you're not so tired. He touched her jaw. Gentle. That was the part nobody believed until they'd lived it, how gentle it could look from the outside. how it could pass in a badly lit kitchen for something almost like tenderness. She didn't sleep much that night. She never did on nights that started with later. The lot was still half dark when she pulled in the next morning, and there he was, the new guy, standing by the employee entrance, with his hands in his pockets, like a man who hadn't decided yet whether he belonged there. "You're early," she said, because it was easier than good morning, easier than anything that required her face to do more than it already had to. Couldn't sleep. A pause. "Nate," he said, and put his hand out like this was a normal thing two strangers did in a dark parking lot before sunrise. "I don't think we actually did that part yesterday." She shook it. His grip was careful. Too careful, like a man who'd had to teach himself at some point how much pressure a hand could hold before it stopped being a handshake and started being something else. "Simone." "I know." Then at her look, "Faye told me. Said you'd train me. Said I'd kiss her a small crooked almost smile. And I'm quoting, 'Don't let him touch the deli slicer. He seems like a finger loser.'" Something in her chest loosened. Barely. A quarter inch. But it was the first thing that had loosened all morning, and her body noticed before her brain gave it permission to. That was when the truck came in. She heard it before she saw it. The specific growl of Corbin's engine, the one she could pick out of 100 trucks in 100 parking lots. Because fear does that. Fear turns you into an instrument tuned to exactly one frequency. It swung in too fast, parked too close, blocked her in without even trying to look like it wasn't on purpose. "Simone." Corbin getting out, unhurried, that same terrible calm from the kitchen, still riding his shoulders like a coat. "Forgot to say goodbye properly." She felt Nate go still beside her. Not dramatic. Just still the way a man goes still when every instinct in him is doing math. "This is Nate," she said too fast. "He's new. We were just—" "Nate." Corbin said the name like he was tasting it for something wrong. He came closer than he needed to. Closer than strangers come on purpose, because that closeness was the whole message. "You always show up early for coworkers you met yesterday." "Guess I'm eager," Nate said. Easy. Unbothered or good at performing unbothered, which Simone was starting to suspect might be the same skill wearing two different names. Huh. Corbin's eyes didn't move off him. "Here's a thought, Nate. My girl's had a rough couple days. Wouldn't want her rougher week getting rougher on account of some new hire deciding he's her personal welcome committee." "Wasn't planning on it," Nate said. Which wasn't quite an apology. Which wasn't quite anything, actually just 3 flat words with no give in them at all. And Simone found herself holding her breath, waiting to see what those words would cost. Corbin's jaw worked once, twice. Then the smile came back on, easy as a light switch aimed at her, now instead of him. "Have a good shift, baby." A kiss to her temple, quick, proprietary. The kind of kiss that wasn't for her at all. She realized, watching Nate's face carefully, not react. It was for the man standing 6 feet away. It was a flag being planted. He got back in the truck. Didn't leave right away. Just sat there a moment, engine idling, watching them walk toward the doors. And Simone didn't look back, because looking back was its own kind of admission. But she felt it the whole way in. That specific heat between her shoulder blades. Being watched by someone who considered watching a form of ownership. "You okay?" Nate asked once the doors had shut behind them, and the truck was just a sound instead of a shadow. "Fine." Automatic. The word came out of her, the way owu comes out of a hand on a hot stove. Reflexive, meaningless, not actually a description of anything. He didn't push, just nodded like fine was an answer he was choosing for now to let stand. which was almost worse than if he'd argued. Because arguing, she knew how to survive. Kindness lately was the thing that kept catching her off guard. Holt found them by the registers at 8:15, clipboard in hand. The particular scowl he wore the way other men wore cologne applied fresh every morning, never quite coming off. "Simone, your trainee." Not a question either. Everyone in this building apparently allergic to questions. "Don't baby him. Corporate wants him productive by tomorrow." "Yes, sir. And you?" A finger jabbed at Nate like punctuation. "Whatever happened yesterday, the scene the customer that doesn't happen twice. This is a store, not a daytime drama." "Understood," Nate said. Something moved behind his eyes when he said it. Something that looked if you were watching closely, and Simone, for reasons she didn't examine too hard, had started watching closely like a man, swallowing several better responses. Holt stalked off toward the office, already barking at someone in aisle 4 about facing the soup cans. "He's always like that?" Nate asked. "Every day." She started pulling her drawer, counting the float hands, moving through motions worn smooth by 2 years of repetition. "You learn to go quiet around him. Everybody does. Quiet's cheaper than getting written up." "Quiet's expensive, too," Nate said. Quiet enough she almost missed it. Just a different currency. She looked up at that. Really looked for the first time not at the cast-off, new guy shape of him, but at whatever was actually sitting behind his face. And what she found there unsettled her in a way she couldn't immediately name. Not danger. The opposite of danger, maybe, which was somehow just as disorienting when you'd spent 3 years calibrated for the other thing. "You talk like someone gave you a lecture on this once," she said. Something flickered, gone before she could catalog it. "Something like that," he said, and picked up the scanner gun like it might explain itself to him if he held it long enough. She showed him anyway. How to angle it. How to bag cold with cold heavy on the bottom bread, never underneath the canned goods unless you wanted a customer complaint by lunch. He was quicker than construction guy first day on a register had any right to be. And there was something almost funny about watching a grown man concentrate this hard on a barcode. "You're doing it wrong," she said around 10, when he'd bagged 3 cans of soup on top of a carton of eggs like a man actively trying to lose the job. "I'm doing it creatively." "You're doing it like someone who's never once thought about eggs." "Listen." Dead serious, terrible comic timing, the eggs already a lost cause behind him. "Where I come from, eggs are a state of mind." She laughed. Actually laughed a short, surprised bark of a thing that startled her more than it startled him, because she couldn't remember offhand the last time a sound like that had made it out of her at work, maybe not at home either, maybe not anywhere in longer than she wanted to count. Faye, 2 registers down, caught her eye over a customer's shoulder. One eyebrow up, a whole conversation in that eyebrow, and none of it subtle. Simone looked away first, but the laugh stayed with her a while. Sat warm in her chest through the lunch rush, through the stalking, through the long gray hour before close. A small foreign thing she kept almost forgetting to be afraid of. That night, 44s, up in an office he hadn't set foot in for 3 days, and already didn't recognize the smell of Sawyer Calder, sat with a laptop open and a phone against his ear. "Vivian, I need Simone Ashworth's personnel file. Store 23. "Everything, sir. Everything." It came through in 11 minutes. He read it standing up because sitting down felt somehow like agreeing to something. 6 months ago. Employee arrived with facial bruising. Stated she'd walked into a cabinet. 4 months ago. Called in sick 3 days. Returned with her arm in a sling. Said she'd fallen off a ladder cleaning gutters. 2 months ago. Supervisor noted employee seemed distressed, reluctant to go home at end of shift. Last month, boyfriend appeared at store during shift. Loud confrontation in the parking lot. Employee upset. Declined to discuss. He read it twice. Then a third time, because some part of him kept expecting the words to rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. And they never did. They just sat there on the screen, clipped and bureaucratic, a woman's entire unraveling filed under incidents like weather. Cabinet, ladder, gutters, declined to discuss, which was its own kind of language, wasn't it? The specific vocabulary of a person building herself a smaller and smaller box to survive inside of. Nobody falls off that many ladders. Nobody walks into that many cabinets. Except a woman running out of true things she's allowed to say out loud until I fell, is the only sentence left that doesn't get her killed for saying it. He thought about the way she'd flinched that first day when he'd reached for her arm to steady her. He thought about the truck in the parking lot. The way Corbin had said her name like it belonged to him. And he thought standing alone in an office with his own name on the door, 40 floors above a store where a woman was currently lying to her own children about how she'd gotten hurt, he thought. I built all of this. Every store, every dollar. And I didn't know. That was the part that wouldn't sit still in him. Not the anger, though there was plenty of that, too, the not knowing. 2 years this had been happening under a roof with his family's name on it in 6-foot red letters, and he'd been in Colombia, personally, tasting coffee beans. He closed the laptop. He didn't sleep much either that night, for entirely different reasons than she didn't. The alarm went off at 11:40 the next morning. Not a fire alarm worse. The low, insistent whoop of mall security, the kind that made every register in the store go still at once. Attention shoppers and employees. This is a security lockdown. Please remain calm. All exits are temporarily sealed. Armed robbery at the jewelry store, Holt announced, radio crackling against his hip like a held breath. Suspect still in the mall. Nobody in or out. The doors sealed with the sound like a held note. And Simone felt the floor tilt underneath her just slightly. Just enough. Because sealed was a word her body knew intimately. Sealed was a word with a very specific, very personal history. Not the same, she told herself. This isn't the same. You can see the whole store. You can see the exits even locked. This isn't, except her hands had already started shaking. Which they did that sometimes ahead of the rest of her hands, getting the news first the way some animals feel earthquakes before people do. Simone, Nate Lowe at her elbow, not touching her. He'd learned that much fast. Hey, look at me. I'm fine. The word so worn out by now it barely qualified as language anymore. You're not. That's okay. You don't have to be. She didn't remember agreeing to the break room. Just found herself there, somehow sitting. Nate crouched in front of her chair, the way you'd kneel for a frightened animal. No sudden moves, no reaching. Breathe with me, he said. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. She tried. Failed. Tried again. The door opened. Billy Cardigan, today the color of a robin's egg, gone slightly gray, caught in the lockdown, mid-purchase a half-full basket, still looped over one arm, like she'd carried it in here on instinct. Oh, honey. No hesitation. Just crossed the room and sat on Simone's other side, like she'd been assigned there. There you are. I can't. Simone's voice cracked clean in half. I can't breathe. I can't, it's like... Like what, sweetheart? Billy's voice low, steady, the specific, unshakable calm, of a woman who'd spent 4 decades in rooms where people's bodies fell apart in front of her. Tell us like what? And it just came out. The way a held breath comes out not gently, not on purpose, just because a body can only hold so much for so long before something gives. He locks me in, she whispered. Sometimes. When I've done something wrong. The bedroom. Or the bathroom. Says he needs time to think about what I did. Nate went very still. How long? Billy asked. Not shocked. Just asking the way you'd ask a patient where it hurts. Hours, sometimes. Once. A breath ragged. Once it was all night. I called in sick the next day because I was too weak to stand up straight. Your children, Billy said. Gentle, relentless. Do they know? They think I'm sick. Her hands had found each other in her lap, gripping so hard, her knuckles had gone white around the cast. They slide drawings under the door, little pictures, to make me feel better. Something broke across Nate's face, then quick there, and gone. But Simone caught it. Not pity. She'd had enough pity to last a lifetime, and this wasn't that. This looked more like rage, wearing a very careful mask. That's not discipline, he said quiet. That's a cage. It's my word against his. The old, worn smooth defense, the one she'd used so many times, it came out now, without her even choosing it. He's very convincing. People like him. I believe you, Billy said. Simple. Absolute. Like the sentence cost her nothing at all, to say which Simone would think later, was maybe the most radical thing anyone had said to her in 3 years. I believe you. 4 words. And something in her chest that had been clenched so long, she'd forgotten it was a fist, finally. Finally let go just a little. Just enough to hurt on the way out, the way a limb hurts when the blood starts moving again after it's been asleep too long. Faye found her an hour later, once the all clear had sounded, and the store had exhaled back into its ordinary rhythm, everyone pretending, the way everyone always pretended that nothing had happened at all. You okay? Faye asked. Leaning against the break room door frame, arms crossed, a posture that looked casual and wasn't. I will be. Faye didn't leave. Just stood there a beat too long, turning something over, Simone could see, her turning it over the specific stillness of a woman, deciding whether a door was worth opening. Can I tell you something? Faye said finally. And you don't have to say anything back. Okay. I was married once. Before here. Faye's eyes were on the vending machine, not on Simone, like it was easier to say to a row of chip bags than to a person. He never hit me where it showed. Learned real quick that showing was the mistake, not the hitting. Took me 6 years to leave. Took me another 2 to stop apologizing to people for taking so long. Simone didn't say anything. Didn't trust her own voice yet. I see things now that I used to miss, Faye said. Used to think that made me nosy. A small, humorless, almost smile. Turns out it just makes me someone who already knows the shape of it. She pushed off the door frame. Paused once more before she left. I wrote a letter, Faye said. Quiet. Not quite meeting Simone's eyes. Month or so back. To corporate. Didn't sign it. Didn't think a breath. Didn't think anybody that far up would actually come looking. Then she was gone back to her register. Back to the ordinary noise of the store, leaving Simone alone with a sentence that would take her days to fully understand the size of. It was Holt who found the badge. Not on purpose. Nate's jacket had slid off the break room chair sometime during the lockdown, and Holt, irritated, already composing the write-up in his head for leaving personal items unattended, 3rd violation this month, picked it up to hang it properly. Something slid out of the inside pocket, landed face up on the linoleum. An executive parking pass, emanated. A photo he recognized immediately because it was hanging considerably larger, considerably more flattering in the lobby of every single Calder Markets location in the southeast, right above a plaque that said founded on trust, built on family. Sawyer Calder. Holt stood very still for a long moment, holding a piece of laminated plastic that had just quietly detonated his entire understanding of the last 3 days. He didn't say anything. That was the part that would eat at him later, lying awake at 2 a.m., turning it over and over. That his first instinct, his very first one, wasn't to march into the office and demand answers. It was to go still. The exact particular stillness he'd learned at 9 years old, standing in a kitchen doorway, in a house 2 states away, watching his father's shoulders for the specific set that meant leave now versus the specific set that meant it's already too late to leave. He hadn't thought about that kitchen in years. Hadn't let himself. But some part of him, the part that had learned young, that the safest thing a person could do around power was disappear from its notice. Some part of him took one look at that badge and thought with a certainty that had nothing to do with logic. Say nothing. Say nothing. And maybe it stays small. Maybe it stays survivable. He slid the pass back into the jacket pocket, hung it up neat like nothing had happened. He told himself it was strategy. He didn't examine too closely how much it actually felt like fear wearing an old familiar coat. Simone clocked out at 6 with her arm aching and her chest still faintly, strangely light. The particular lightness of a person who has just set down something heavy without quite believing yet that she's allowed to leave it there. Nate walked her as far as the doors. Not further. He seemed to understand without being told exactly where the invisible line sat. Today was she started and didn't know how to finish it. Yeah, he said, like he understood the sentence anyway, unfinished. She almost told him then. About Corbin. About the later, still hanging over tonight like weather. The words got right up to the edge of her mouth and stopped there. Stubborn, guarded by 3 years of practice. "He'll ask what took you so long to walk to the car," said the voice that lived behind her ribs these days, the one that did math faster than she could. "He'll ask who you were talking to. He always asks." So instead she just said, "Thanks for today." "You don't have to thank me." "I know." A small, unfamiliar smile still testing its own edges. "I'm doing it anyway." She drove home with the radio off the way she always did, listening, instead, to the specific quality of silence a person learns to read like weather, and somewhere behind her, in the flat gray dusk of the parking lot, a truck she hadn't noticed until just now sat idling near the exit. Not moving, just watching her pull out. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself that all the way home, and by the time she reached her own street, she had almost made herself believe it. 2 quiet days can do a strange amount of work on a person. Not fix anything. Nothing was fixed. The cast was still there. The bruise had only just started turning that sickly yellow-green that meant healing, and Corbin was still. Corbin, still counting her purse every morning like a man auditing a business he suspected was skimming from him. But something had shifted anyway. Small, almost embarrassing in how small it was. She'd started saying good morning to people, meaning it some days. The candy aisle needed restocking Wednesday afternoon, which was how she ended up on her knees with a box cutter and a case of fun-sized chocolate bars. Nate crouched beside her, sorting by brand, with the concentration of a man diffusing something. "You're doing it wrong," she said. because apparently that was just a thing she said to him now. I'm doing it efficiently. There's a system. The system is chocolate goes left always. That's not a system. That's a religion. Fine. It's a religion. Don't test me on it. He held up a fun-size bar, like evidence in a trial. This one's clearly wandered from its people. That's a Snickers in the Milky Way section. That's a hate crime. He laughed, a real one, surprised out of him, and something in her chest did the thing it kept doing lately. That small, unfamiliar loosening, like a hand she hadn't known was clenched, easing open one finger at a time. Willow would have sorted this whole case in 10 minutes, she said, before she'd quite decided to say it. She alphabetizes her stuffed animals. Made me test her on it once. I missed one, and she looked at me like I'd personally let her down. How old? 8 going on 40. Wants to be a marine biologist, or an astronaut. Depends on the week, last week it was. Dolphins, this week. Her teacher showed them pictures from some telescope. And now she won't stop talking about nebula, which I had to look up how to spell that, so. He smiled at that. A real one, she was starting to be able to tell the difference between the polite smile he gave customers and this other one, the one that reached somewhere further back, and the little one. Theo, 6, draws constantly. Used to be all monsters and battles, good guys winning. A pause she didn't examine too hard. Lately it's just families. Little stick people standing close together. I don't know what that means. I don't know if I want to. She hadn't meant to say that last part out loud. Nate didn't push, just nodded like he understood exactly the shape of a sentence a person says by accident, and immediately wishes she could take back. Which was, she was noticing, sort of his whole thing. Faye found them there 20 minutes later, hip against the end cap arms, crossed in the specific way that meant she had something to say, and had already decided she was saying it. Heads up, Faye said, low. Not unkind, just efficient Faye, delivering bad news the way she delivered everything straight and fast, like ripping tape. Denise from the bakery mentioned to Trina that you two ate lunch together Monday, in the break room, alone. We did, Simone said. Careful. We work together. I know that. I'm not the one you need to convince, Ger. Faye's eyes flicked toward the front windows, toward the parking lot, toward nothing in particular, and everything at once. Denise's cousin cuts hair 2 chairs down from the place you're from, Corbin's place. Small world. Smaller than you'd like some days. The chocolate bar in Simone's hand suddenly felt very heavy. He wouldn't have any reason to hear about it, she said. Which wasn't a denial. Wasn't anything, really just a sentence built entirely out of hope. The flimsiest architecture there was. Faye's face did something complicated. Something that looked like she wanted to say honey hopes, not a plan, and decided at the last second that Simone had enough weight on her today. Just watch yourself tonight, Faye said instead, and walked off toward Register 3, leaving the word sitting there in the candy aisle, like something spilled that nobody had cleaned up yet. Nate hadn't said anything, but she felt him go very still beside her, the same particular stillness she was starting to recognize as him doing math. The porch light was on again that night. She'd stopped believing that meant anything good. Corbin was at the kitchen table when she came in, and the kids were already down, too early for their bedtime, she noted. Filed it away, the way she filed everything. Now evidence for a case she never let herself finish building. Good day, he asked. Pleasant, which she'd learned the hard way over and over was never actually a question about her day. Fine, long. Heard you had lunch with the new guy. Still pleasant, still not looking up from his phone. Alone, in the break room. Small world, she thought. Smaller than you'd like some days. Faye's voice hours old, already proving itself true faster than she'd wanted. He's a co-worker, Corbin. We eat in the same room as everybody. Alone. He set the phone down, looked at her finally, and there it was, that flat, patient thing behind his eyes that she'd learned to read faster than weather. You know how that looks. It doesn't look like anything. It's a break room. There's a table. Simone. Her name again, that specific weight he put on it. I'm not trying to start something. I'm just telling you how it looks. From the outside. To people who don't know you the way I do. Nobody knows me the way you think you do. She almost said. Didn't. Because that sentence spoken out loud in this kitchen had a cost attached to it. And she'd learned 3 years deep into this particular arithmetic exactly which sentences she could afford and which ones she couldn't. He stood, came around the table, slow the way he always moved when he wanted her to feel every second of him closing the distance. I don't like sharing, he said, soft, almost tender if you didn't know better. You understand that about me. I've always been honest about that. There's nothing to share. He's just, I know what he is. A hand gentle at the back of her neck. Not squeezing. Not yet. Just resting there. A fact more than a threat. Though the line between those two things had gotten so thin in this house, she couldn't always find it anymore. I just need you to be smarter about how things look. For both our sakes. Both our sakes. As if there were a both left in this. As if she hadn't been doing the sums alone for years now, carrying 2 children's worth of sake on her own back, while he counted her purse and called it partnership. Okay, she said, because okay was the cheapest word in the house. Because okay cost nothing, and ended things fastest and got her 1 step closer to the door of Willow's room, where she could sit on the edge of the bed and watch her daughter breathe, and remember briefly why any of this math mattered at all. 40 floors up in a hotel suite that still smelled like nobody actually lived in it. Sawyer's phone lit up at 11:40 p.m. Unknown number. Tell your girlfriend to stay away from my woman, or you'll both regret it. He read it twice. Then went to the window like the skyline outside might explain how a man he'd met exactly 3 times had gotten a number that wasn't even listed under his real name. He hadn't given it to anyone at the store. Hadn't given it to Simone. Which meant Corbin had gone looking. Which meant a man who scanned grocery receipts for evidence of disloyalty had somehow found a cell number belonging to a construction worker named Nate, who did not technically exist. That should have frightened him more than it did. Mostly what he felt was a kind of clean, cold clarity, the specific quiet that comes right before a person stops weighing options and starts making calls. Silas, it's Sawyer. I need everything you can find on a Corbin Vance. Tonight, if you can manage it. Everything meaning everything. Criminal record, civil filings. Every address he's had in the last 10 years, and every woman who's ever needed one of them to be temporary. A pause on the line. Silas had worked federal cases for 11 years before he'd worked for Sawyer, and there was a particular silence. Sawyer had learned to recognize it, the silence of a man who already suspected what he was about to find, and was bracing to be right. I'll have something by morning, Silas said. He did, by 6 a.m. in fact, which told Sawyer plenty about how quickly the pattern had surfaced once someone actually went looking. 2 prior restraining orders filed, both by former girlfriends. Both withdrawn within 90 days, one relocated out of state before the hearing, one cited reconciliation in the withdrawal paperwork, and then quietly moved 3 states away 11 months later without a forwarding address. A former co-worker filed a harassment complaint in 2019, withdrawn after she resigned. No convictions, no charges that ever stuck. A man who had been on paper a phantom clean record, steady job, the kind of file that looked at a glance like nothing at all. Sawyer read it, standing up again. Same as the first file. He was noticing that about himself now, the way certain kinds of horror wouldn't let him sit down for them, like his body understood before his brain caught up that this was information a person needed to be braced for. Withdrawn. Withdrawn. Reconciliation. Relocated. That was the pattern. Not violence that got caught. Violence that got managed, smoothed over, walked back, buried under paperwork, by women who had learned the hard way that fighting cost more than folding. I thought about the duct tape line in the police blotter language of the second complaint subject alleges being restrained during an altercation, and had to set the tablet down for a second. Hands flat on the desk, breathing through something that felt uncomfortably like the same math Simone did every morning in her bathroom mirror. He's done this before, Sawyer thought. Which means he knows exactly how far he can go, and exactly how to make it disappear afterward. Which means this isn't a man losing control. This is a man executing a plan he's run twice already, and learned from both times. Corbin showed up at the store at 11:20 the next morning, not through the employee entrance. Through the front, like a customer pushing a cart he filled with things nobody actually needed. A bag of limes, a box of crackers, a candle shaped like a pumpkin, though it was nowhere near the season for it. Shopping the way a man shops when shopping isn't actually the point. Simone saw him first, felt the whole store tilt sideways the second she did. I didn't come to her register right away. That was its own cruelty, the waiting 20 minutes of him drifting the aisles in her peripheral vision, while she scanned groceries with hands that had started very quietly to shake. Holt noticed him too. Watched him the way you'd watch weather turning, and found himself without quite meaning to drifting closer to register 4, not close enough to help, not brave enough for that, just close enough to not be entirely absent if something happened. Because that was the deal Holt had made with himself somewhere around 2 a.m., 2 nights ago, staring at his ceiling with a laminated parking pass burned into his memory. Say nothing. Stay close. Do the smallest possible version of decent, because the big version costs more than you've ever been brave enough to spend. He hated himself a little for it. Filed the hating away, same place he filed everything. At 11:41, Corbin finally rolled his cart up to register 4. Hey baby. Loud enough. On purpose. 2 customers in line turned to look, and he smiled at them, too warm, easy a man, performing concerned boyfriend for an audience he'd made sure would be there. Thought I'd surprise you. Bring you lunch, maybe. You look tired. I'm working, Corbin. I can see that. His eyes went to her cast. Lingered. How's the arm? Fine. Good. He started unloading the cart. Limes, crackers, the ridiculous candle. And then, from the pocket of his jacket, not the cart at all, a roll of duct tape. A fistful of zip ties. A box cutter, the kind with the retractable blade, set down on the belt beside the crackers like it belonged there. Like it was groceries. Just picking up supplies, he said. Pleasant. So pleasant. Little project at home. Simone stared at the items on the belt. Felt the floor go somewhere very far away. Zip ties. Her mind supplied, unhelpfully, uselessly, the way minds do at the worst possible moments. Zip ties don't fix a faucet. Zip ties don't hang a shelf. Zip ties hold something still. Scan it, baby. Still smiling. Still soft. A man delivering a threat with the exact cadence of a man asking about the weather. And that was the part that made her stomach drop hardest. That anyone watching, anyone who didn't already know the shape of him, would have seen nothing here at all. Just a boyfriend, buying tape. And then she almost missed it, would have missed it entirely if she hadn't spent 3 years learning to read every degree of him. His eyes flicked up, toward the small black dome in the ceiling above Register 4. Just for a second. A glance so brief it barely qualified as one. But it was there, and it was deliberate, and something about the specific care of it, the way he angled his shoulder just so made sure his face stayed visible, kept his voice pitched exactly loud enough to carry and exactly mild enough to sound harmless on a recording, made the back of Simone's neck go cold, in a way that had nothing to do with fear of this moment. It felt for reasons she couldn't yet name, like watching a man build something. Carefully. On purpose. Like he wasn't just threatening her. He was making evidence. Nate had come around the end cap by then, restocking Forgotten, a case of canned soup abandoned mid-aisle. He stopped 6 feet from the register. Didn't move closer. Just stood there very still, watching Corbin's hands. "Something wrong," Corbin said without turning around. Like he'd known exactly where Nate was standing the whole time. Like this had always, from the moment he walked through those doors, been for him. "Not yet," Nate said. Corbin turned then. Slow. That same unhurried menace the one Simone had felt in the parking lot, and now felt again doubled tripled, in the fluorescent brightness of a store full of people who had no idea what they were watching. "You keep showing up," Corbin said. "Wherever she is. That's an interesting habit for a co-worker." "I work here." "Sure you do." A smile with nothing warm left in it at all. "Here's some advice, Nate. Free of charge. You keep circling my girl, you're gonna find out exactly what kind of project this tape's actually for." The line dropped like a stone. 2 customers behind Corbin had gone very quiet. Faye at Register 3 had frozen mid-transaction her customer's card, still in her hand. Somewhere behind them, Holt had stopped pretending to reorganize the cigarette case, and was just watching now openly, his knuckles white on the edge of the counter. "Is that a threat?" Nate said. Quiet. Too quiet, maybe the kind of quiet that comes from a man working very hard to sound calmer than he is. "It's advice." Corbin's smile didn't move. From one man to another, about minding his own business. "She is my business." The words were out before Sawyer had fully decided to let them be. Something underneath Nate rising up through the surface of him. Fast hot. 3 days of watching this woman flinch at raised voices finally catching a match. Because she's a person, not something you get to keep tabs on. Corbin went very still. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me." The cart was between them, but it wasn't much of a barrier, 3 feet of plastic and produce, and Corbin closed half of it in one step close enough. Now that Simone could see the exact moment something in his face stopped performing for the cameras and started being real. "Corbin," she said. Her own voice sounded very far away to her. "Corbin, please, not here. Stay out of this." "I'm not staying out of anything. I'm right here." I said, "Sir." Holt's voice cutting in louder than Simone had ever heard him use it, not the barking at employees' voice. Something else. Something that sounded, for once, almost like it belonged to a person trying to do the right thing, without knowing exactly how. "I'm going to need you to lower your voice. Or leave." Corbin didn't even look at him. Didn't break whatever staring match he'd locked into with Nate, the two of them, close enough now that the cart had been pushed aside, without either of them seeming to notice doing it. "You think you know something about me," Corbin said. "Low now. Just for Nate. Just for the two of them." though half the store could still hear it in the particular silence a scene like this creates around itself. "You don't know anything. You've been here 4 days. I know enough. You know nothing." And there it was. Finally the mask slipping all the way, not loud, not violent, worse than that. A kind of cold clarity coming off him, like heat off pavement. "I built a life. I've got a good job, a clean record, people who'll vouch for me. What do you have? A jacket that doesn't fit right, and a habit of showing up where you're not wanted." "I have eyes," Nate said. "That's apparently rarer than it should be around here." Something in Corbin's jaw jumped. For one full second, Simone would think about this second for a long time. Afterward, turn it over in her hands like a stone. For one full second, she genuinely believed he was going to hit him. Right there. Under the fluorescent lights in front of the crackers and the limes and the pumpkin candle. Nobody needed, with 2 customers and a security camera, and God as his witnesses. He didn't. Instead, he laughed, short, ugly, reached down, unhurried, and picked the box cutter back up off the belt, turned it over once in his fingers, like he was only now remembering it was there, like the whole thing had just been an oversight. "Ring me up," he said to Simone, now not looking at her, his eyes still on Nate. "I've got somewhere to be." She rang him up with hands that would not stop shaking. $47.83. He paid in cash, counted out exact. No tip. No thank you. And gathered the bag. Tape ties, box cutter. One lonely candle into his arms like groceries. Like nothing. At the door he stopped, turned back just enough. "We'll finish this at home," he said to her. Soft again. Almost gentle. The gentleness was the worst part, always the worst part, because gentleness from him had never once in 3 years meant what gentleness was supposed to mean. "And you," a last look at Nate, unhurried cataloging, "enjoy the rest of your shift, while you've still got one." The automatic doors closed behind him with their ordinary little chime, cheerful and small, and completely wrong for what had just happened underneath it. For a long moment, nobody in the store moved at all. Holt found his voice first. Barely. "Back to work," he said to the store in general, to nobody, his own hands not quite steady on the clipboard he was gripping like a life raft. "Show's over." It wasn't. Not really. The air didn't go back to normal, just quieter the way air gets after something loud. Everyone in the building, carrying some fraction of what they'd just watched, tucking it away, to think about later, alone the way people do. Simone stood at her register with the receipt tape still curling out of the machine, and found she couldn't for a moment remember how to make her hands do the next thing they were supposed to do. "Hey, Nate, close now." Close enough that she could see he was shaking, too small, contained a man holding something back, with everything he had. "Hey, look at me." "You shouldn't have done that." Her voice came out cracked in half. "You don't understand what he's going to." "I understand exactly what he is. Quiet. Fierce. That's the problem, Simone. I understand it completely, and I still can't make myself walk away from it." She didn't have an answer for that. Didn't trust herself to try building one, not with her whole body still ringing like a struck bell. Faye appeared at her elbow, wordless, and folded her into a hug that Simone hadn't asked for, and needed more than she could have said. Over Faye's shoulder, she caught Billy in the far checkout line, must have come in. Sometime during it all must have seen at least the tail end, standing very still, one hand pressed flat over her own heart, like she was holding something in. Billy caught her eye. Didn't smile. Just gave a single slow nod, the specific nod of someone who has spent 40 years in rooms where terrible things happen and has learned the hard way that a nod can sometimes carry more than words. "You're still here," the nod said. "That's not nothing. That's not nothing at all." And somewhere behind the deli counter, unnoticed by everyone in that shaken, breathless store, Holt Pruitt stood with his clipboard forgotten at his side, staring at the spot where Corbin Vance had been standing, and thought about a laminated badge sitting quiet in a jacket pocket, and a kitchen doorway. 2 states and 30 years away, and the particular familiar shame of a man who had once again chosen to stay very still and call it strategy. He didn't know yet that staying still wasn't going to be an option much longer. None of them did. But something had cracked open in that store today. Something bigger than a tape roll and a threat, and a man walking out through automatic doors like he owned every single thing he'd left behind him. And cracks. Simone was starting to understand in her bones, in the part of her that had spent 3 years learning to survive, by staying small. Cracks were how the light got in, even when they hurt going in. Especially then. He'd said it soft. That was the part that wouldn't leave her alone. "We'll finish this at home." Soft like a man setting down a fork. Soft like nothing at all, and that was exactly why it had lodged itself somewhere behind her ribs and stayed there all afternoon, ticking. Because soft was how it always started. Loud came later. Loud was for after, when the door was locked, and nobody could hear the difference between soft and loud anymore. She was still at register 4 at 4 o'clock, ringing up a woman buying diapers and rotisserie chicken, and some detached floating part of her brain kept doing math it didn't want to do. 6 hours until the shift ends. 6 hours until I have her to walk through that door and find out exactly what finish means tonight. Until she wasn't doing math anymore. Until her hands had just stopped mid-scan a can of green beans hovering over the reader, and the customer was saying, Miss, are you? Sorry." The word came out thin. "Sorry, long day." She rang the rest up wrong twice. Nate found her in the break room a little after 5, sitting very still with her hands flat on the table, like she was holding it down. Holding herself down. Some part of her had learned a long time ago that if you kept your hands pressed flat to something solid, the shaking had somewhere to go besides your voice. "You can't go home tonight." "I have to." Automatic. She'd said this sentence so many times it barely required her anymore. "My kids are there. If I don't come home, then don't go alone." There is no not alone, Nate. That's not a thing that exists for me. Her voice cracked on his name, and something about that, some small, exhausted honesty in it, made her keep going when she should have stopped. "You don't understand what tonight's going to be." He said, "We'll finish this, and I've heard that sentence before, and I know exactly what shape it takes, and there is nobody. There has never been anybody. There's me." "You're sweet." She said it like an apology, like she was breaking something gently on purpose. "But you can't. You're a guy from a construction site who's been here 4 days. You can't fix 3 years in an afternoon." "My name isn't Nate." The words landed strange, sideways, like a sentence that had wandered in from somewhere else entirely and hadn't found its footing yet. "What?" "My name isn't Nate," he said again. Steadier this time, though something in his jaw was working like the sentence cost him more than it should have. "It's Sawyer. Sawyer Calder. I own this store." A breath. "I own all of them." Silence did a strange thing in that break room. Got very large, very fast, the way a small space does, right before something in it breaks. "That's not funny. I'm not joking. That's not..." She stood up, sat back down. stood again because her body seemed to have opinions her brain hadn't authorized yet. Calder, like the name on the building, like the Sawyer that's not a thing, people just are. That's not a costume you get to take off in a break room. I know how it sounds. Do you? Her voice had gone somewhere thin and dangerous, now somewhere she barely recognized. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like every single conversation we've had this week has been a man in disguise deciding what parts of my life were interesting enough to watch. It wasn't like that, wasn't it? And here it came, 3 years of swallowed things finally finding a door. You know things about me now, things I never told anyone, and you let me say them to a person who doesn't exist. I let you say them to someone who was listening. His voice didn't rise. That was the thing about him. It never rose, not once, not even now, and some small stubborn part of her registered that as its own kind of evidence. Every word of it was real, Simone. The only thing that wasn't real was the name on my badge. She wanted to argue with that. Couldn't quite not, with her chest doing this. Not with the whole room tilted sideways, and her own name still ringing strange in a stranger's mouth. Why? She said instead. Small. Why does a man who owns 40 stores spend a week stocking soup cans for a woman he'd never met? He hesitated. Just a beat. Long enough that she'd think about it later, turn it over, though she wouldn't understand why, until much further down the road than either of them could see yet. I had a cousin once, he said. Someone hurt her the way he's hurting you. I watched what it cost her to get out. I watched what it cost the people who loved her to just watch. I promised myself a long time ago I'd never be one of the ones who just watched. It wasn't the whole truth. She would learn that eventually. But it was true enough in the moment to sit between them, like something solid, something she could, if she let herself put a hand on. Before she could answer, the door slammed open hard enough to bounce off the wall. Holt. Is it true? No preamble. His eyes were wild in a way she'd never seen on him, not once, not through 2 years of write-ups and clipboards, and a face permanently set to disappointed. Corporate. They're saying there's a rumor going around that we've got a Calder on the floor, and I need to know if I'm about to lose my job over a badge I found on a jacket. You found the badge, Sawyer said. Quiet. Not a question. 3 days ago. Holt's hands weren't steady either, she noticed. Everyone's hands apparently coming apart today. I put it back. I didn't say anything. I told myself that was smart, that was strategy, and it wasn't, it was just... He stopped. Started again, quieter. It was just the same thing I always do. Something passed over his face then, that Simone had never once seen there. Not the scowl, not the clipboard voice. Something underneath both of those, old and tired and ashamed. I need you both to trust me for the next 20 minutes, Sawyer said, because after that, none of this is going to be quiet anymore. He already had his phone out. Silas, it's Sawyer. I need a full security detail at store 23 right now. And I need you coordinating with the police for protective custody, a domestic violence victim, 2 children. A pause, listening. I'll explain everything after. Just move. He dialed again before the first call had even finished ringing off. This is Sawyer Calder. I need to speak to the front office. Something in his voice shifted. Here went crisper, colder. A register. She hadn't heard from him yet, the sound of a man who was used to doors opening the instant he knocked on them. 2 students, Willow and Theo Ashworth. Their mother is a domestic violence victim, and we have reason to believe the children may be in danger. I need them held safely until officers arrive to escort them. Yes, I'll take full responsibility for that. He hung up. Simone stood there in the middle of the break room, watching a stranger she'd known for 4 days rearrange the entire architecture of her life with 2 phone calls, and felt something so large and unfamiliar rise up in her chest that she didn't have a name ready for it. Not gratitude exactly. Not relief, not yet relief, required trusting the ground under her feet, and the ground hadn't held still in about 11 minutes. Just seen. That word again. The one from Billy's napkin. You are not alone. She hadn't believed it. Not really. Not until right now, watching a man burn down his own careful anonymity because staying hidden had stopped mattering more than her children did. Sawyer. Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. If this is real. If you're really who you say you are. A breath. Why does it feel like I should be more afraid than I am? Because you've spent 3 years being taught that help always comes with a price, he said. I know. I'm not asking you to trust the whole thing at once, just the next 20 minutes. She didn't get the chance to answer. The door banged open again, harder this time, hard enough to crack against the wall a second time in the space of 10 minutes, and this time it wasn't Holt standing in the frame. There you are. Corbin's voice deceptively even. That was always the worst version of him, the even one. The one that meant whatever was underneath had already decided exactly what it wanted to do, and was simply choosing for now to be patient about the order of operations. I'm at work. Simone was already backing up the old instinct, taking her feet before her brain could catch up. You can't be here. Can't I? He stepped further in, filling the doorway the way he always did, not just his body, the whole room, all the air in it, until there was nowhere left in the space that didn't belong to him. I'm a paying customer. Got a receipt and everything. His eyes found Sawyer. Something moved across his face. Slow, deliberate. The particular expression of a man laying down cards he'd been holding for a while, savoring the reveal almost as much as the win. Well, well. A smile with nothing warm in it. If it isn't the hero. Corbin, Simone started. I've been doing some digging, Nate. He said the name like a joke, only he found funny. Followed you home the other night. Fancy hotel for a construction guy. Made me curious. Turns out, a small mock thoughtful pause, letting it land. There's no Dan Mitchell working construction anywhere in this county. But there's a Sawyer Calder who owns every single store with his name bolted over the door. Simone felt the floor tilt again. He'd known. This whole time he'd known, and he'd let it sit there like a knife in his pocket, waiting for the exact moment it would cut deepest. You think I'm stupid, Corbin said. Quiet now, aimed at her. You think I don't see what this is? Rich boy plays dress-up gets close. Fills your head with ideas about how you're too good for me. She is too good for you, Sawyer said. Careful. Corbin didn't even look at him. Still on her. Only ever on her. You know what he's doing right. Been here 4 days. Doesn't know the first thing about you, and he's already got you thinking. You can just walk out. Start over. You signed something once, remember? You know what happens if you try that again. That was coerced, Sawyer said. You held her hostage with the threat of losing her kids and called it a confession. That's not going to hold up anywhere, not anymore. You don't know anything about our life. I know enough. Sawyer's voice hadn't risen once through any of it, that same infuriating, unbreakable calm, but something underneath it had gone very hard, very still, like a held breath about to be released all at once. I know about the restraining orders. 2 of them. Both withdrawn, both from women who moved states away to make sure they never had to see you again. I know about the co-worker who quit rather than finish a harassment complaint. I know about the tape and the zip ties you brought here Wednesday, and made sure the camera got a good clean look at your face while you did it. Something flickered behind Corbin's eyes. Fast, there and gone. He didn't know we knew Simone thought, and something about that thought. Small, strange, oddly steadying helped her find her feet again under her. "You think that's evidence of anything," Corbin said. "Too fast. That's a man buying hardware." "It's a pattern," Sawyer said. "And patterns are what juries actually convict people on." Corbin's jaw worked once. Twice. And for a moment, one single terrible moment, Simone watched every ounce of charm slide off his face like water off glass, leaving something underneath that had never once in 3 years needed to hide itself in front of her before. He moved fast. Faster than she expected. Faster than her body had time to flinch away from a hand shooting out, closing around her wrist, the cast one, and even through 3 days of healing. Bone, she felt the whole arm light up with a pain that stole her breath clean out of her chest. "You don't get to decide this is over," he said, low, right against her ear. "I decide. I've always decided." Let go of her. Or what? Corbin Vance. A new voice. Flat. Official. The kind of voice that had said those exact 3 words 1,000 times before, and didn't need to raise itself to be obeyed. 3 officers in the doorway. Silas just behind them, already stepping past to put himself between Sawyer and the room's only exit. Old instinct, she'd learn later, the muscle memory of 11 years doing exactly this kind of work. Corbin's hand didn't move off her wrist. "Sir," the lead officer said, "I need you to release her arm. Now." "This is a misunderstanding," Corbin said, and there it was, the switch flipping, instant seamless, the charm sliding right back over his face like nothing underneath had ever cracked at all. "We're having a private conversation. She's my girlfriend." "Ma'am." The officer's eyes were on Simone, now steady patient. "Is that true? Is this a private conversation?" And here, right here, in the exact second, it mattered most, Simone found something in herself she hadn't known was still standing. She pulled her wrist free. It hurt. She let it hurt, and she didn't flinch away from the pain, the way she'd trained herself to for 3 years. She stood in it, steady, and looked the officer dead in the eye. "No," she said. Clear. Loud enough for the whole room. "He assaulted me 3 days ago. Broke my arm. He's been threatening me all week. I have text messages. I have witnesses. I have a co-worker who saw him bring restraints into this building on Wednesday and threaten a man in front of 2 customers. His name is Corbin Vance. I want to press charges. All of them. Right now, while I still have the nerve." The room went very still. Corbin's face did something complicated. Shock first, quick and unguarded, like he'd genuinely never once considered that the woman he'd spent 3 years making small might one day speak in a voice this size. "Simone, don't." One word. It came out steadier than anything she'd said in 3 years. "You don't get my name in your mouth anymore." The officers moved then fast and practiced, and Corbin's hands were behind his back, and the cuffs were on before he'd finished processing what had just happened to him. That a woman he'd spent 3 years convincing was too broken to matter. Had just in 11 seconds handed the entire case against him, gift-wrapped to the state. "This isn't over," he said, twisting to look back at her as they walked him out. Something ugly and cornered in his face, now all the charm burned clean away. "You have no idea what you just started." "Yes, I do," Simone said. I started the part where I stop being afraid of you." The automatic doors chimed behind him, cheerful and small, exactly like they always did exactly wrong for what had just walked out through them. For a long moment, nobody in the break room moved. Then Faye was there out of nowhere, wrapping her up so hard it hurt her ribs, and Billy appeared right behind her. Must have been in the store the whole time. Must have seen the whole thing unfold through the window. One hand pressed to her chest, eyes bright and wet and fierce all at once. "There she is," Billy said, quiet, like she was talking to someone only she could fully see. "There's that woman I knew was in there." Simone didn't cry. She'd expected to. Instead, she just stood there, shaking, held up by two women who weren't obligated to hold her up at all, and had chosen to anyway, and felt something in her chest that had been clenched for 3 straight years. Finally, begin not to heal. Not yet. Just to breathe. 3 days later, the call came while she was making Theo's lunch. He's out. Bail. $50,000 posted by a woman named Marguerite Vance, who turned out according to the lawyer. Sawyer had already hired a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Reyes who'd taken Simone's case like it was personal to be Corbin's mother. Simone hadn't known his mother was still alive. He'd told her once early on that his parents were both gone. One more small lie in a house built entirely out of them. She sat in her kitchen with the phone in her hand, and Theo's sandwich half made on the counter, and felt the old fear come back in through the same door. It had always used quiet, familiar, wearing its old, comfortable shoes. He's out. He knows where we live. He knows where the kids go to school. "You're safe," Reyes said on the other end of the line, steady as a hand on a shoulder. "There's a protective order in place. Full contact restriction. He so much as drives down your street, that's a violation, and violations put people back in a cell fast." "You don't know him," Simone said. "Paper doesn't stop him. Paper never stopped him." "I know." A pause gentler than the rest. "That's why there's a car outside your house tonight. And every night until this is finished." Marguerite Vance sat in her own kitchen, 3 towns over, a cup of coffee going cold in front of her, and did not touch her phone for 11 straight hours after she'd posted her son's bail. She was 63 years old. She had raised that boy alone after his father left, had told herself for 30 years that the temper was inherited. Fair and square, and not her fault to fix, had told herself more recently, in a smaller and more shameful voice, that whatever happened in his house was between him and the women who chose to stay in it. She had believed that mostly, had built a whole peaceful life on top of believing it. Then a lawyer's office had called asking questions about a birthday party 11 years back, when her son was 22, and his girlfriend at the time had shown up with a wrist wrapped in an ace bandage and a story about a fall that Marguerite, even then even fresh in her own denial, hadn't quite believed. She had smiled at that girl across a cake, had said nothing, had told herself the way she'd tell herself 100 more times over the following decade that it wasn't her business that boys sometimes had tempers, that it would sort itself out. It had never sorted itself out. It had just found you women. She sat with her coffee a long time. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number the lawyer's office had left, and said in a voice that shook only a little, "This is Corbin's mother. I think I need to tell someone what I've actually seen." The hearing was 4 months later in a courtroom that smelled like old carpet and stronger coffee, and Simone sat beside Attorney Reyes, with her hands folded so tight in her lap that her knuckles had gone pale. Corbin's lawyer was good. That was the part nobody warned you about, how good the other side's lawyer could be. How easily a man's whole ugly history could be repackaged in a room like this into the story of a woman who simply couldn't keep her life together. Ms. Ashworth was written up 4 times in 2 years for attendance and conduct issues, the lawyer said, holding up a folder like it was a verdict already rendered. She's had documented panic episodes at her place of employment. She left her previous residence with the children without notice on at least one occasion. We're not disputing that this is a difficult situation. We're asking the court to consider whether it's a situation my client caused or one he's being blamed for. Simone felt the floor tilt that old familiar sensation. 3 years of Corbin's voice, suddenly speaking through a stranger in a suit using her own worst days as ammunition against her. "They're going to believe him," said the voice behind her ribs. "They always believe him. That's the whole design of it. That's why it worked for 3 years. She reached for Reyes's sleeve. Reyes gave the smallest shake of her head. Wait, because that was when the courtroom doors opened, and a woman in her 60s walked in, wearing a coat too warm for the season, and took the stand, with hands that would not stop shaking, and said the words she'd been carrying unspoken for 11 years. "My name is Marguerite Vance," she said. "I'm Corbin's mother, and I have known what my son was for a very long time. I just never had the courage to say it out loud until now." She talked for 11 minutes. About the girlfriend at the birthday party. About a call at 2 a.m. years back that she'd hung up on rather than hear the end of. About every small cowardly silence she'd built her peace on top of one by one, laid out now in a courtroom for a woman she'd never met to finally get the benefit of. "I should have said something a long time ago," she said at the end, looking not at the judge, not at her son, but straight at Simone. "I'm sorry it took this long. I'm not sorry I finally did it." The courtroom was very quiet after that. Corbin's face from where Simone sat had gone the color of old paper. Holt testified the next morning. "I hadn't planned to. Had told Reyes, in fact, in a clipped, uncomfortable phone call the week before, that he didn't see what a floor supervisor's account added to anything that he'd only seen the aftermath of things, never the things themselves. Reyes had asked him one question that changed his mind. Were you ever told by anyone above you to keep an employee's incident reports from going any further than your own file cabinet? He hadn't answered right away. Had sat with the phone against his ear a long time, staring at nothing, thinking about a kitchen doorway in a house 2 states and 30 years gone, and a father whose temper the whole family had learned early to manage instead of name. He hadn't been that father. He'd told himself that for years hadn't raised a hand to anyone, not once, not ever. But he'd built a whole career, he realized now, sitting with that silent phone out of the exact same skill his childhood had taught him. First and best, how to make himself small and useful in the presence of something dangerous, and called the smallness strategy. He'd done it with Corbin's file. He'd done it with a laminated badge in a jacket pocket. 3 days he could have said something and hadn't. "Yes," he said on the stand, his voice rougher than he meant it to be. "I was told more than once over the past 2 years that certain incidents involving Ms. Ashworth didn't need to go into her permanent file. That corporate didn't want a pattern on paper. I was told it would look bad for the store." "And did you comply?" Reyes asked. "Yes." He looked for just a second at Simone, a look with something in it that wasn't quite an apology, because an apology would have been too small a word for what he actually owed her. "I've spent my whole life staying quiet around things that scared me. I told myself it was smart. It wasn't smart." A breath. It was just the same fear wearing a work badge. Reyes let the silence sit a moment before her next question. "Why speak up now?" Holt looked at his own hands a long moment before he answered. "Because I found out this week that being quiet doesn't actually keep anyone safe," he said. "It just keeps you comfortable while somebody else pays for it." They broke for recess a little after 11, and Simone found herself in the hallway outside the courtroom, back against cool marble breathing, like she'd run somewhere, instead of just sitting still for 3 hours. Sawyer found her there. "You okay?" "I don't know." Her voice came out thin, but steadier than it had any right to be. "4 months ago, I thought the whole world was one man's kitchen table. Now there's a courtroom full of people saying things out loud that I've been carrying alone since before I even had Willow." She looked at him. "I don't know what to do with that yet. I don't know how to be a person this doesn't happen to anymore." "You don't have to know yet," he said. "You just have to keep being the person who spoke up in that break room. The rest builds itself around that slower than you'd like, but it builds." She almost laughed a small, exhausted, real sound. "You sound very sure of that for a man who's never once had to be brave in a break room." "No," he agreed. "I've just gotten very good lately at recognizing it in other people." Down the hall, through a set of glass doors, she could see Marguerite Vance, sitting alone on a bench coat, still buttoned, hands folded, looking like a woman who had spent 11 years bracing for a conversation she'd finally had and didn't yet know how to feel about surviving. Simone thought about Willow, about the drawings that still sometimes slid the wrong kind of quiet under a door in her mind, even now that no doors in her house locked from the outside anymore. She thought someday, that could be me, sitting on a bench somewhere, finally saying the thing I should have said years sooner. She hoped fiercely that it wouldn't take her 11 years to learn what Marguerite Vance had just learned in a courtroom. She had a feeling Small knew, still finding its footing, that it wouldn't, because something had cracked open in her 4 months ago, under fluorescent light in front of a security camera and 2 frightened customers. And cracks, she was learning, didn't close back up once the light got all the way in. They just kept letting more of it through. The recess bell rang. Reyes touched her elbow gentle. "Ready." Simone stood up straight, wiped her palms once against her skirt. "Yeah," she said. "Let's finish this." The word came out of the jury 4-person's mouth in under a second. Guilty. 3 years to earn, 4 months to prove it. And the actual saying of it lasted about as long as a breath held too long finally let go. Simone didn't cry. She'd expected to, had braced for it the way you brace for a wave, feet planted, ready to be knocked sideways. Instead, she just sat there very still, Reyes's hand warm on her arm, and felt something enormous and wordless move through her chest and out the other side. Not joy. Not yet. Something quieter than that. Something closer to finally. Behind her 2 rows, back, Corbin sat with his shoulders squared and his face arranged into careful blankness. A man performing dignity for a room that had just stopped believing anything he performed. His mother wasn't there that day. Margot Vance had said everything she needed to say already on a stand in front of God, and a court reporter and some things. Simone understood this now. In her bones, some things only need saying once if you say them right. It's over, she thought. Except it wasn't. Not quite. Because guilty was a word, and a word wasn't a sentence, and there were still 6 weeks between this room and whatever came next. 6 weeks was a long time to hold your breath. She tried not to. That was the project, those 6 weeks trying not to hold her breath, trying to let her shoulders come down from around her ears, trying to remember what her own body felt like when it wasn't bracing for something. Some days it almost worked. Willow had started reading at the dinner table again out loud. Whole chapters about deep-sea creatures with names too long for an 8-year-old's mouth, and she said them anyway, fierce and unbothered, and Simone would sit there some nights just listening, thinking, there she is. There's my girl all the way back. Theo's drawings had changed, too. She'd noticed it first. Without noticing, she'd noticed a shift, slow the battles thinning out, the monsters retreating to the corners of the page, until one Tuesday, he handed her a picture of their whole family, standing in a yard that didn't exist yet. Sun overhead, nobody's face turned away from anybody else's. "What's this one?" she'd asked. "Us," he said. Simple, like it needed no more explaining than that. She'd had to leave the room for a minute after that. Sawyer came around most evenings now. Not staying, never staying, not yet, both of them, too careful for that, too aware of how fast, too soon, could curdle into something that looked from a certain angle, like exactly the pattern she'd just spent 3 years surviving. So he came for dinner. Fixed the cabinet hinge that had been squeaking since before Corbin. Let Theo beat him at checkers 4 times running with a consistency that fooled absolutely nobody and delighted the 6-year-old anyway. "You're bad at this on purpose," Willow told him once, arms crossed, unimpressed. "I'm strategically generous," Sawyer said. "That's not a real thing." "It's a very real thing. Ask any billionaire." Willow rolled her eyes so hard, Simone laughed out loud from the kitchen doorway, and caught herself laughing, the way she still sometimes did, surprised by the sound of her own joy, like it belonged to somebody else's house. It didn't. Not anymore. It was hers. She was still learning that. Some lessons took longer to land than others. The call came on a Thursday, 2:40 in the afternoon. She was 3 miles from Willow's school, stopped at a red light when her phone lit up with Silas's name, and something in her went instantly completely cold before she'd even answered, before a single word had been said, because bodies know. Bodies always know first. Simone. Silas's voice, flat and fast, the voice of a man trained to stay calm, precisely, so other people didn't have to. "He's at the school. Parking lot. He's not supposed to be within 1,000 feet of either of those kids, and he's standing at the fence line right now." The light turned green. She didn't move for a full second, hands locked on the wheel, the world gone very narrow and very loud all at once. Then she was driving. Fast. Faster than she should have. Faster than she'd ever driven in her life, because "he's at the school" was a sentence that rearranged every cell in a mother's body into a single screaming directive, and there wasn't room left in her for anything else. Not fear, not thought. Just get there. He can't. He's not allowed. There's a paper that says he's not allowed. As if paper ever stopped him. As if paper ever once in 3 years stopped anything at all. She pulled into the lot, doing 20 over the posted limit, and slammed the car into park at an angle that would earn her a scolding from absolutely no one. Not today, not with what she was seeing through the windshield. Corbin. At the fence. Not moving toward the gate, couldn't security had already closed it. A teacher's aide standing in the gap, with her arms crossed and her phone already to her ear, but standing there anyway, hands in his pockets, watching the pickup line with the patient, unbothered posture of a man who believed right up until the last possible second that rules were a thing that happened to other people. He saw her get out of the car. Smiled. That smile. God, that smile. She'd know it in the dark. Know it in her sleep. Know it for the rest of her life, probably. And it still. Even now. Even after everything sent something old and cold sliding down the back of her neck. "Just wanted to see them," he called out. Easy. Reasonable. A man explaining himself to an audience he was certain would take his side the way audiences always had before. "Is that a crime, now, wanting to see my own? They were never yours." Her voice came out of her steadier than she felt, steadier than she had any right to feel, with her heart trying to climb straight up through her throat. "You don't get to say that word about them. Not ever again." Simone, don't. He took one step toward the fence, which was the step that did it. The step a patrol car had apparently been 3 minutes from anticipating because it came around the corner of the lot, with its lights already spinning silent fast, and 2 officers were out of it, and moving before Corbin had finished the sentence he hadn't gotten to say. Corbin Vance. The same flat official cadence she'd heard once already months ago, in a break room that felt like a different lifetime now. You are in violation of an active protective order. Hands where I can see them. This is insane. I didn't even come near the hands. For one long terrible second he didn't move. Just stood there, jaw working something wild, flickering up behind his eyes, the look of a cornered animal doing math on how much room it had left to run. There wasn't any. There hadn't been really since the day Simone stopped believing paper was the only thing standing between them. He put his hands up. Behind the fence, through the chain link, she caught one glimpse of Willow's face pressed to the classroom window, too far to have heard any of it. Thank God, too far to know anything, except that something was happening in the parking lot her mother was standing in. Simone raised a hand. Small. Steady or steady enough, I'm here. I'm okay. You're okay. Willow raised one back. That was all either of them needed. Sentencing was 6 days later. The judge's voice was dry, unhurried, the voice of a person who had said a great many hard things to a great many people, and had learned somewhere along the way to say them without flinching. The court takes seriously the pattern established across this trial, she said. 2 prior withdrawn complaints, a documented history of coercive control, and as of last week, a direct and deliberate violation of this court's own protective order, committed within sight of the victim's minor child. A pause, long enough that Simone felt her own pulse in her ears. This court sentences the defendant to 7 years. Not 4. 7. Simone sat very still and let the number land, somewhere deep, somewhere that had been waiting 3 years for exactly this kind of arithmetic to finally come out in her favor. Corbin didn't look at her as they let him out. She noticed that, filed it away the way she still filed things out of old habit. Except this time, the filing didn't cost her anything. This time it was just a fact, small, and finished about a man who no longer got to take up any more room in her life than that. 7 years. She walked out of that courthouse into ordinary spring sunlight and found she didn't know for a moment what to do. With a sky this wide open. The Ashworth Center opened on a Saturday in June, and the morning of it, Simone stood in the bathroom of her new apartment, hers her name on the lease. A fact she still touched sometimes like a bruise to check if it was real, and looked at her own reflection for a long time. No cast. The arm had healed clean a thin white line where the break had been the only evidence left, and even that would fade eventually. The doctor said. Eventually. No concealer, either. She'd almost reached for it out of pure muscle memory, and then stopped hand-hovering over the drawer, and thought there's nothing left to hide. She left it closed. 15,000 square feet of glass and warm wood, on a lot that had been an empty parking structure 8 months ago. A ribbon, the color of a robin's egg. Billy's doing that color choice, and nobody had argued with her about it. Reporters from 3 local stations. A mayor's aide. A folding chair in the front row with Billy Callahan taped to the back of it in Willow's careful, determined handwriting, because Willow had said she needs to be able to see Mama. She's the reason any of this happened, and 8-year-olds, it turned out, sometimes understood the shape of a story better than anyone twice their age. Faye, near the back arms, crossed, blinking too fast. Holt 3 rows behind her, in a suit that didn't quite fit here, on his own time, because nobody had made him come. Addie, who'd driven 4 hours that morning after a phone call 2 weeks back that had started with, "I owe you an apology. I should have given you years ago," and ended with both of them crying on the phone like the whole distance between them had just been waiting this whole time for someone to finally say the true thing out loud. In the quiet, just before the crowd fully settled, Rosalind Calder found her near a wall of donor names that hadn't been unveiled yet. Simone had met her only once before, briefly, at a dinner that felt now like it belonged to somebody else's life. A composed woman. Careful posture. The particular elegance of someone who had spent decades making sure nothing about her ever looked out of place. "That was a remarkable thing you're about to do," Rosalind said. Her voice wasn't quite steady. Simone noticed that first the crack under the composure, small but real. "Thank you for coming. I need to tell you something." Rosalind glanced once toward Sawyer, still 15 feet off, deep in conversation with a reporter unaware. "And I need to tell you before he does, because I think it's mine to say, not his." Simone waited. "He told you once he had a cousin," Rosalind said. "Someone who was hurt the way you were hurt. That's what he tells everyone. It's not entirely a lie." A breath unsteady, now 38 years of careful composure, finally coming apart at the seams. "It's just not the whole truth. Mrs. Calder, it was me." 2 words. She said them like she'd been carrying them a long time further than anyone in this parking lot could guess. "Before Sawyer was born. My first marriage. I don't talk about it. I've never talked about it, not to my son, not until he was 30 years old. And I watched him fall in love with a woman who reminded me more than I could stand, some days, of the person I used to be, before I learned how to disappear inside my own house." Simone felt something in her chest go very still. "I told him about a cousin," Rosalind said, "because I couldn't yet say mother. Because some truths take a person their whole life to build up the courage for. And I was still building mine, right up until I watched you cut that ribbon just now." A small, wet, unsteady laugh. "You did in one afternoon what I couldn't manage in 38 years. "You did it today," Simone said gently. "That's not nothing. That's not nothing at all." Rosalind looked at her for a long moment. Something passed between them that didn't need any more words attached to it. 2 women decades apart, standing on opposite ends of the exact same long road. "He never knew," Rosalind said. "Not until right now, saying it to you first. I think some part of me needed to say it to someone who'd understand it before I said it to my own son." "I understand it," Simone said. "I understand it completely." Simone stood at the podium and looked out at all of it. Faye near the back. Holt 3 rows behind her, and Addie Sawyer, standing off to the side, not at the podium, that had been his choice made weeks ago, quiet and firm. "This one's yours. All the way yours." Simone gripped the sides of the podium, felt her hands. Steady. Actually steady for the first time in longer than she could remember. 3 years ago, she said, I was a woman who scanned groceries with a broken arm and told everyone I fell. Her voice didn't shake. She'd been afraid it would. It didn't. I believed for a very long time that I was invisible, that the bruises would stay hidden as long as I wore the right shade of concealer and smiled hard enough at the right customers, that nobody was actually looking. A breath. I was wrong. Somebody was always looking. I just hadn't learned yet what it looked like when the looking came from someone who meant to help. Her eyes found Billy's 3 feet from the front row cardigan, the color of the ribbon behind her. A woman I barely knew left a napkin on a break room table with 4 words on it. You are not alone. I didn't believe her. Not that day. A small unguarded smile. I believe her now. She looked out at the rest of them. Holt Fay. Addie Sawyer, standing quiet at the edge of everything, letting her have every inch of this. This building isn't a monument to one rescue, she said. It's a promise that the next woman who's standing where I was standing doesn't have to wait for a stranger to notice. She'll have somewhere to walk into on her own. Legal help, a place to sleep that isn't a car. Someone across a desk who already knows the shape of what she's carrying, because she's carried it herself. A pause, steady sure. Nobody should have to be lucky to get free. That's the whole point of this place. Nobody should ever again need luck for something that ought to be a right. She cut the ribbon herself. Robin's egg blew, and Billy clapped louder than anyone in that whole crowd on her feet before the scissors had even finished closing. She found Sawyer a few minutes later near the edge of the lot, watching the last of the crowd filter out into the June evening. "Your mother told me something," she said. Something crossed his face, quick, unreadable, the specific stillness of a man bracing for news he didn't yet have the shape of. "She'll tell you herself," Simone said before he could ask. "It's not mine to hand you second-hand. Just go find her. Tonight. Not tomorrow." He looked at her a long moment, then nodded once and went, and Simone stood alone at the edge of her own building, watching him walk toward his mother, across a parking lot still littered with ribbon and folding chairs, and thought everybody's carrying something. Everybody's just trying to find the one person who will finally let them put it down. Willow found her by the doors, tugging her sleeve, Theo trailing behind with a paper cup of lemonade held like treasure in both hands. "Mama, did you mean it? What you said up there, every word, baby." Willow considered this with the particular gravity of an 8-year-old deciding whether the world had in fact gotten a little safer today. "Good," she said. Simple, final. Then already moving on to the next thing the way children do blessedly, mercifully do. "Can we get ice cream?" Miss Billy said. "There's a place 2 blocks from here that does the kind, with the little chocolate shells." "We can get ice cream." Theo slipped his small hand into hers on one side. Willow took the other. And Simone stood there for just a moment. One child on each side. Evening light coming, gold, and low across a building, with her own name on it, and let herself feel fully, without flinching away from it, exactly how far. 3 years and one Napan and a whole lot of people who refused to look away had actually carried her. Not rescued. She was careful with that word now. Careful the way she was careful with all the words that used to define her. Carried. There was a difference. She'd learned it the hard way, and she intended to spend the rest of her life making sure nobody else had to learn it quite so hard as she had. Behind her, Sawyer's voice low laughing at something his mother had said. Ahead of her, 2 kids arguing cheerfully about chocolate shells versus sprinkles. And somewhere in between all of it, steady now, finally unmistakably steady, Simone Ashworth walked forward into an evening she had built herself. One true thing at a time. She was not invisible. She never had been. She'd just needed the whole world to finally catch up to what she'd always known was true.